everyone. Good evening. Welcome. I'm Kara Carmack, the Assistant Director of Exhibitions and Public Programs at the New York Studio School, and I'm honored to welcome you to our Fall 2023 Evening Lecture Series. I've long been looking forward to tonight's panel discussion on Ruth Miller's work in conjunction with our exhibition downstairs, Ruth Miller's Enduring View, which is on view until October 22nd. We have some additional programming coming up that I'm pleased to share. Join me tomorrow in the gallery at 1 p.m. in person or on Instagram Live for a conversation between Janice Nowinski and Clintel Steed. And the following Wednesday on October 18th at 1 p.m., also in person and live streaming on our Instagram page, we'll welcome Glenn Goldberg, John Goodrich, and John Mitchell to discuss Ruth's work further. A reminder to those here on 8th Street to please silence all cell phones. We will reserve time at the end for a Q&A with the audience. For those in the room, please raise your hand. I'll bring a microphone to you so our online audience can hear your question. For our Zoom audience, please submit your questions by clicking on the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Following the lecture, please join me and our guests downstairs in the clay room for light refreshments, and to secure your copy of the fast-selling book, Ruth Miller Painted Presents, published by Grid Books. The New York Studio School is grateful to the following funders for their support of the 23-24 Evening Lecture Series: the National Endowment for the Arts, the New York State Council on the Arts, the New York Department of Cultural Affairs in partnership with the City Council, the Robert Lehman Foundation, the Samuel H. Kress Foundation, and many generous individual contributors. I'm excited to share that our annual benefit is coming up on Thursday, October 19th. Please find invitations downstairs on our book signing table. We still have tickets available for the cocktail hour and silent auction from 6 to 8 p.m. on the 19th, and some dinner tickets remain available as well. Please visit our website to learn more, to make a donation to help keep our programs, like the Evening Lecture Series, free and open to the public. Now, I'm delighted to briefly introduce our panelists this evening in order of appearance, I believe. Mark Lewis constructs his large-scale collages with paper, graphite, and paint on site at urban locations in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Lewis completed his BFA at the Kansas City Art Institute and received his MFA in painting at Yale University. He is represented by the Bowery Gallery in New York. Mark has been a guest lecturer and taught in numerous programs, including the University of Tulsa, American University, Georgetown University, the University of Virginia, Chautauqua, Mount Gretna School of Art, FIT, and the New York Studio School. Recently, Lewis put together Ruth Miller Painted Presents, a collection of written individual observations by painters and writers on Ruth's work. And published by Grid Books, copies are available downstairs. Lohin received a BFA from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, studied at the New York Studio School, and earned an MFA from Parsons School of Design. Her work has been shown nationally and internationally for more than 30 years. She served as program director at the New York Studio School from 1988 to 1998, and she has taught painting at Alfred University, Western Carolina University, and Mount Gretna. She was director and co-owner of the Lohin New York Gallery for 10 years, where she organized several exhibitions of Ruth's work. Elisa Jensen lives and works in Brooklyn. She's received awards for her work from the New York Foundation for the Arts, the National Academy Museum, and the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Solo and two-person shows include those at Pamela Salisbury Gallery in Hudson, David and Schweitzer Contemporary in Brooklyn, John Davis Gallery in Hudson, the Painting Center in New York, the Royal Danish Consulate General in New York, and Morsø Kunstforening in Denmark. Her work has been reviewed and featured in 2 Coats of Paint, Whitehot Magazine, Hyperallergic, Art Critical, the New York Sun, and the New York Times. Jensen graduated from Smith College and the New York Studio School. She currently teaches here at the Studio School and Pratt Institute. And Stanley Lewis studied art in Wesleyan University and received his MFA from Yale. He has taught at several institutions, including the New York Studio School, American University, Kansas City Art Institute, and Chautauqua, among many others. Lewis has been exhibiting since the early 70s and is in the collection of the Hood Museum of Art at Dartmouth College, the Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, the National Academy of Design, and Hudson Art Center at American University, among others. He received a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2005 and has been elected to the National Academy. Lewis is represented by Betty Cunningham Gallery in New York, and I also just personally want to express my gratitude to the panelists, but especially Ruth for all of her work and being such a beautiful collaborator and giving us your painting. So thank you, Ruth, and thank you, panelists.
Okay, thanks, Kara. It's so nice to be here with you tonight, and it's just nice to be here to talk about Ruth's painting. I've been following Ruth's works, I think, since 1981, Ruth. I don't know if you remember, but we met in Norfolk, Connecticut, and you were there teaching drawing, and there were some wonderful people there as well, including Wilbur Newald and Louis Finkelstein, and I remember George McNeil had a show there that summer, which I so enjoyed his presence. And while I was there, painting was still fairly new to me, and so working in landscape was somewhat new to me. So I would go out and make the rounds and see what everyone was doing, and so I found Wilbur and Louis, and I found you working in, I want to say Baglia's orchard or Bagliano's orchard, and you didn't seem to mind if I came up and talked to you for a minute and observe you working, and that made a big impression on me, your work and what you were doing. And I think one of the big things about that was the sense of volume in your work, and maybe it was the way you were handling the tree trunks of the orchard or what have you, but I just almost felt like it was shocking to see someone that had that sensibility and articulation of form, and it stuck with me, and I can still see that in the gallery today. But I was shocked by the volume. I loved the rhythm and the structure and all of those things, of course, too. It was so beautiful. But it was something about, it was something about the realness of the presence in the work, not that you were imitating your subject or holding up a mirror to your subject, but the creation of this parallel world through this trialogue of subject, looking and responding to the subject, and looking and responding to your work. And I love to witness that when I look at someone's painting, and I can see that in your work. In the galleries today. I'm going to go ahead and read a little section too. I'm going to go on by approaching the work this way. If you think about a perceptual painter, and if you think about the artist as someone that was breathing in with their eyes and exhaling with their hands, breathing in with your eyes and exhaling with your hands, breathing in with your eyes and exhaling with your hands, and as it passes through your hands, you reveal your humanness in all its complexity and mystery. Also, there's just that little magic touch of your fingers too. There's something special there. But if you also think that between your eyes and hands that a transformation takes place, and of course this can be very spontaneous and happen in an instant. In this transformation, there's awareness of the history of art, an awareness of the arts more broadly, an awareness of the artists that you love. There's awareness of your humanness. And there's also a willingness to challenge oneself constantly in the moment and to be open with us, to share with us, and maybe even take a chance to be vulnerable with us. So I think of you as a brave person, as a brave artist. And I feel like you're doing all these things that I just mentioned. There's a passion in the work, and there's a truthfulness for me. I know that because I can witness that. It's the best I can do, maybe, but I can witness it and experience it. I found this nice Philip Guston quote the other day. He said, "You see, I think that creating is a double process. You have to be sophisticated as hell and innocent as hell at the same time." He goes, "It's a real impossibility but I think that's what it is. There's something nice about that. So let's go ahead and go to the first image. Okay, great, thank you. Go back maybe one. There. So I just chose to talk about drawings tonight. Hopefully I'll get a chance to respond to some of the paintings, but I particularly wanted to talk about the drawings. And I think this is a beautiful drawing. I guess I'm initially drawn to frontality, and this is such a beautiful drawing in that way. There's a touch and caress of the graphite across the surface, and it's very subtle. I mean, maybe you see it even more here, but it makes me think about a Seurat drawing or something, but it's far more subtle. But it's sort of the enjoyment of your hand touching the paper and moving across the surface of the drawing. I like the asymmetry of all the features. And then I think there's sort of a curious tension with that shoulder, like the shoulder that's elusive. And but I like the way we could sort of move around the head and wrap around the front of the torso. I should maybe be using the pointer, but I love all those, that echoing, let me see if I can figure this out. Oy. Let me look here. Okay. I love the echoing of these marks coming back in and just tucking behind the ear. And then even thinking about this side to the way the ear is treated on the other side, there seems to be kind of this way of moving in. I love all the structure that's taking place. And I already mentioned sort of the asymmetry of the features. I love the way we wrap around, like the scarf wraps around the neck. And I think that's so beautiful. But after saying all that, again, there's just a kind of presence of the figure, the head, and she's like she's looking sort of toward us and past us, maybe at the same time. Anyway, it's a beautiful drawing. This is another drawing that I love, and it has that sort of frontality and fleshiness to it as well. And I think it's about 10 inches tall, 8 inches wide, something like that. And I can't help but thinking about some of those de Kooning drawings that are there's one at the Modern, it's about this size. But again, it's the volume for me, and the rhythm, and all these open searching sort of structural lines that I find in it. I think are so beautiful. But I love the way, the sort of tactile way the arm tucks around the leg here, and I've loved the way the breast sort of links in with the leg, but then this sort of sets it back into the space well. I like that she's fronting us and she's kind of exposed to us, and the way the chair is turned at an angle to us. But again, it's just, for me, it's like the rhythm, the openness, the searching mark, and like even some of the larger things, like this big arc coming around here. I think it's so beautiful the way that relates to the leg. The sort of roundness of the head, and then I was like, what's this little curious thing here? It's like a curious little, and Ruth, I'm going to probably pick out some things that you're like, Mark, it's like, I'm not sure that was intentional or should be called attention to, but I think it's like a curious little like thing that's sort of grimacing or something. But again, I think it's such a beautiful structural drawing, and I'm still kind of amazed by how it can be so open and rhythmic in this intimate scale. Okay, let's go to the next one. I mean, I don't really know what to say about this one, other than it's beautiful, and it's, I think it was a sort of a complex personal moment with a loved one.
This is my mother at the end of her life. She slept a great deal in her chair, and it was a very, very hot summer. It's a very, very hot summer. And to keep her comfortable, we would open her blouse. I would open her blouse. And it's probably obvious to some of you that she'd had, some years before this drawing, she'd had breast surgery, and one breast had been removed because she'd had cancer. And I think after this drawing was the time of this drawing, she still had about 2 years with us. So she's just sleeping peacefully. She looks out of it, of course, but she's there.
It's a beautiful drawing.
I'm glad you have it, Mark. I'm glad it's yours.
I am too. Oops. This one's called Stormy Day, Missouri Landscape, and this is a beautiful, to me, a beautiful and mysterious drawing. It's a subject that's familiar to Ruth. You can see it in many of her paintings and drawings, and there's some in the gallery too. I'm not even sure where to start with this one, but I just love the volume. Love the volume, and again, in the tree, the forms of the tree. And Elisa and I were looking at a still life just a minute ago, and we were talking about this sort of rhythmic placing of objects. I was going to say this one does sort of thing, this shape to this shape, and this shape back to this shape. It's so beautiful. And I mean, I just think it's such a, the longer I look at it, it seems to become even a little bit more mysterious to me. And maybe it's not, maybe just the little obvious things, but you know, the repetition of this shape again to this one, in the way this one's sort of tucked in front of the rock that's there. I mean, spatially, it almost feels like it should be set back, but obviously it's not. Little things like that. I also have enjoyed looking at and thinking about the possibilities within this shape. And again, it's a Missouri landscape, but I keep feeling like this shape pushing into the tree trunk, and it almost feels like a 3/4 view profile, sort of pushing in. So we have the trunk of the tree, and we have this sort of pushing in. And I love the way this shape as well is sort of locked in into this. I think it's so beautiful. So we have this locked in shape with the tree, and then this helps set up the scale, the way we move around into the landscape, maybe move back around behind the trees. But I just really enjoy the configurations in here and think about all these possibilities. And I don't know, it's like if I'm overly tried to looking for a secondary imagery there, but I think the work is so organic, it's natural to experience that and think about that. So Ruth, maybe we'll talk about that on the side a little bit later. It's a beautiful drawing, and it's probably about 12 by 16 inches, something like that. Another intimate drawing. Okay, I've got a couple more right along here. This is a beautiful drawing of Andrew. It's called Andrew's Pipe. And I don't know what, maybe some of the same things that I see and I love in the first drawing that we looked at, the portrait. Again, it's just sort of some of these structural things that are happening are so nice. Such a beautiful drawing. But then I was like, well, this is curious too. Like, what is this little bit up here? What's going on? Because it almost seems a little out of character, but then it seems sort of, again, mysterious to me. And I think okay, sorry. This little section right here in the forehead. Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. It almost feels like this is a hip and a head and an arm reaching back down or something, but I just find it very curious and makes an interesting part of the drawing for me. This is another intimate drawing. Again, the touch, the sensitivity for light is something that's constant in all these drawings. Okay, let me show one more. This is a drawing that's in the show upstairs, and I know I've seen this before somewhere, but it's another drawing I love. And is this in England, or is it?
it's looking out from a porch over a meadow that going back and back, which sort of round formed or shape.
Yeah, I love the way you do take us back in space. Like there's almost feels like there's a row of trees here that sort of tuck behind the central tree and takes us back into shape.
Yes, it's a bank of trees, a hillside, but a bank of trees.
That's beautiful the way we move down into the space. And I love the scale of this one, this like little sheep here. And I love the way it is set in between these larger shapes. But again, I guess lately I've got a thing for scale. So this is really, I really love the feeling of that. And I love all these sort of almost biomorphic shapes that I tend to associate with maybe forms of figures as well. And then I don't mean to push this way of looking at it on anyone, but I still can't help but find this this sort of like, it's like a top of a head, a top of a skull here or a head, sort of like the eye sockets. But again, these beautiful organic shapes that we sort of move around in the landscape. It feels like there might be a little bit of rain maybe coming in here, or is this light coming through the landscape, and maybe even a suggestion of a rainbow as well. I'm not sure, but
I don't remember.
okay. So I just, and this drawing to me, like all the drawings feel very complete to me. And I just think there's such a wonderful addition to your paintings. And this one has a certain kind of completeness, which I am very much in love with. I think it's so nice. And so it was fun to see it in person upstairs this afternoon, because there's a sense for the surface that I don't get from the reproductions. And there's a kind of density in the way you handle material. So there's so many wonderful things, and it's nice to see it in person again, because I think it's been quite a while. So I probably missed some things I was going to say about this, but after saying all this, I just think you should look and be open to exploring Ruth's work. And I think when you spend time with Ruth's work, you'll find it visually satisfying. So thank you. So, Ro? Yeah.
No, we don't change it. No, go back. Okay, leave that on that. I got to introduce that. I titled mine, "Still Life Painting is Not for Sissies." I say this because if you paint from life, if it's a landscape, you got all that detail and infinity. And if it's a figurative or self-portrait, there's emotional, expressive power, or flowers have that delicate beauty and color. But cabbages and radishes and eggs and old bottles and knives and forks just don't make it so easy to sustain. So that explains my title. I've thought about this panel way too much, especially given there are 6 of us, including Cara and Ruth, and not that much time. And I'm going to try to speak as fast as I can because I have a lot to say. So this is just a little aside that occurred to me. Bill Scott wrote something very beautiful on Facebook. So if you're, looking, following the breadcrumbs, find that and read it. It's profoundly beautiful. And also, I did work here for 10 years, and I think I saw over 600 lectures. I added them up, and one of them was Ruth Miller's lecture on her own work, and it was so beautiful, and it was one of the best lectures out of the 600. So I'm telling you, if you are still interested, no cringing, contact the librarian and make an appointment to hear Ruth talk about her work. Okay, so this is my disclaimer that I'm not an art historian, and my photos aren't going to add up chronologically, and especially here with Elisa's beautiful way with thoughts and words, and Mark's incredible endeavor and talking about art, and Stanley's art talk contagion. My only way forward is just to be rough and opinionated and all over the place. So first of all, I wanted to say that I was telling this to Cara earlier, that I think these talks at the studio school are really important and will be dug up and used by art historians of the future. And when the painting world is set right and the cream comes to the top and artists are reconsidered. Now, I might be wrong about this, like Watteau or El Greco or Van Gogh, that the archives here at the studio school will be of high interest in painters like Ruth Miller, Nicholas Caroni, Gretna Campbell, Mercedes Matter, Charles Cajori, and so many others will all get their due. I plan to present a verbal history of Ruth Miller and have gotten most of the facts and approval by Ruth herself. So thank you, Ruth. This part I didn't get approval on. First, anybody who knows me knows that I've said this 400 million times to friends and clients when I had the gallery. In my opinion, Ruth Miller is the greatest living painter. And I think, and I'm going to be able to prove this in a minute or two visually, so just hang on. And so moving forward, that's it, Ruth, that's the only cringeworthy one. Now, here's some things you don't know about Ruth. She has it all. Many loves, much art, family, friendships, masterful drawing, masterful painting, warmth, beauty, and a wonderful, wild, sometimes wicked sense of humor. One of the craziest facts, now how do I get over there, Lisa? One of the craziest facts is through the years, how many people have told me that they considered Ruth Miller their best friend? And I've been told this more than once. Mercedes Matter, who sits in the center there with Ruth on the right, like it looks like they're talking to Louis Finkelstein, and I thought maybe that little head was Leo Steinberg, but who knows? No, that's Louis, but this one, the one on the right, because they're kind of focused. Anyway, so this is, I think, a dinner after Leland Bell's talk or something. But I've been told this more than once. Mercedes told me it, Natalie Charco-Hollander told me that, Diane Ward, I'm sure, would say that, Margaret Grimes, Jess, LZ Kogel, Anki King, Sandra Bailey, just to name a few of them. They all, that was their best friend, so I think that's really interesting. Okay, Ruth studied with Fred Shane and Ted Denyer, is that the right one? At University of Missouri. She was introduced by Denyer to the work of Gorky and de Kooning and Ryder. Shane, this is gonna sound like, you know, name dropping, but this is all true. Shane also introduced Ruth to his friends Thomas Hart Benton and John Sloan. In the 1950s, she dropped out of the MFA program and came to New York by bus with $10 in her pocket. Through a friend in DC, she was introduced to Ezra Pound, and through him met sculptor Michael Lukakis, and through him Knox Martin and Jack Tworkov. Right, okay. She studied briefly at the Art Students League with artists who include painter Morris Cantor, Vita Shell, and Edwin Dickinson. I've got the names Paul Brock and Miriam Shapiro, but I'm not sure if they fit at that point. Got that, okay. Can't get it all right. Close friend for life, painters Pat Pasloff and Milton Resnick smuggled her into Hoffman's class, which she attended until he moved the class to Provincetown. She quickly got to know the 10th Street artists, de Kooning, Tworkov, Cajori, Hartigan, Matter. Okay, next one. In the mid-1950s, she met abstract Spanish painter Esteban Vicente. This is Spanish painter. What did I say? Spanish. He was a major influence, teacher, and lover. They were together 4 years. Their liaison led to the birth of a remarkable daughter in 1959, Jessica LZ Kogel. Jessica was a prominent, accomplished geologist. Recently, she lost her battle with pancreatic cancer and leaves behind her husband, Bob, and 2 children, Allegra and Matthew. Ruth left the city for Delaware and Landenberg, Pennsylvania, when Jess was very young. She and her lifelong friend and first husband, Roland LZ, raised Jess and 2 other children, Caitlin and Lucas. It was during, that's Ruth. Oh my God. Look how big that, look at that little, it was. That's what we wanted to know. Did I get that to you? Maybe not. That's Ruth and her children, and she's painting. It was during that time, with all that responsibility, that Ruth did the large on-site Landenberg paintings, which are on display downstairs in the Studio School Gallery. There were over 30 or so of these works done in the 1960s. They were provocative and elicited some pretty wild comments from Ruth's colleagues. Close friend Grace Hardigan, in a letter after seeing them, wrote that Ruth wasn't a serious painter because of her relationship to nature. Bill Bailey succinctly said this: "I do not like them, Ruth." Rudy Burkhardt said, "You got too much going on." Ruth herself has said that these paintings were about an encounter with trees, a close-up encounter where she had to get to the center of them. She needed the scale to be a place where she could walk into. Elaine de Kooning and Ronald Bladen said, "Something's going on, don't show them to anybody." Well, put that microphone.
Oh, okay. Pardon me?
Use your microphone.
Oh, you must add that Kajori liked them.
Kajori liked them. Put that on one. Oh, let's see, wait a minute. Okay, fast forward 65 years, and we're lucky to see these. Like I said, I'm not a historian. We're lucky to see these unseen Landenberg works, and they are provocative. I hope there'll be many discussions put forward while these works are still up. In early 1970, Ruth was asked to critique at Goldsmiths in London. While there, she met painter and writer Andrew Forge. Andrew and Ruth had an immediate love. Okay, can you get that? Now, this isn't Ruth and Andrew, but that's the only one I have of Andrew. Married in 1975 with a joyous celebratory wedding party thrown by Dory Ashton. They were a power couple with warmth and generosity, and inseparable until his death in 2002. That's Andrew and Leland Bell and Louisa Matthias Stoter. At first they lived in New York, but as Andrew's star was rising in the States, he was offered a role as dean at Yale. They moved to New Haven, then later on to Washington Depot, Connecticut. In New Haven, Ruth and Andrew's circle expanded. The Baileys, the Charcoal Hollanders, the Chayets, the Kajuris, just to name a few. Ruth was actively sought after to teach, and in 1973, Nicholas Caroni brought her to the studio school to teach his drawing class. And if any of you know how masterful and strict and serious a painter Nick was, to bring Ruth in was very cool. Okay, my first meeting was in 1978 at the studio school in the painting and drawing class that she and Gretna Campbell shared. As an almost beginner, I did write down one thing which I'll share that Ruth said, quote, "Color is the most difficult thing to understand, but the most expressive," unquote. You did say that. I wrote it down. Between 1988 and 98, I was program coordinator, assistant to the Dean, Graham Nixon. It was a privilege to have that job with Graham and be in the epicenter of the New York Studio School, especially at a time when several of the original faculty members were still present. Ruth was teaching at the same time going back and forth to Missouri to care for her mother. There she drew her mother constantly and painted many of the iconic small oak tree paintings which we've all come to adore. Okay, the next. After one visit, she showed me a very small sketchbook with dozens of drawings of her mother. They took my breath away, and one that I just swooned over, Ruth tore out and generously gave to me. Oh, that's that one, so beautiful. I had it framed. Okay, little did she know, okay, you can go to the next one. Little did she know her influence on me. After that, and for at least 2 decades, I drew and watercolored very small works of my family. So Ryan, if you're watching, you're in there. Anyway, in 2003, I opened up a gallery, Lohin Gallery on 25th Street in Chelsea. The years we were open gave me a unique opportunity to view works of art over time by artists that I love. Okay, the next one. Now, I'll quickly show you the grounds for why I think Ruth is the greatest living painter. Well, I promised. I will not talk about the indescribable depth or powerful representation as expression, but just about the quality of eye travel, that which I believe makes a great painting great. That, oh, I don't need to say that. Meanings of darks and lights and warms and cools and fat and lean and fast and slow and complementaries and neutrals, and all with the keen consciousness of the picture plane. So, try to follow this. At the end of her solo show that she had, most of her paintings found new owners, but this small, almost square painting, Watermelon, Peaches, and Rose, was not able to be hung in the show. Ruth, in her generous fashion, gave it to me. Living with this work, lit by sunlight, and looking at it over and over has led me to a deeper appreciation and everlasting curiosity. Now, it's a still life with familiar objects artists love: cloth, pottery, 4 peaches, a melon, and a rose. The palette is all earth, a perfect balance of warm toasty browns, delicate pinks and oranges, and subdued blue-gray. Ruth builds her objects, never represents them. They're all made of the stuff of things. Placed in an altar arrangement, tiered in a circular fashion that carries the movement from the closest peach to, all right, so where's the closest peach? To behind 2 parallel vessels in the upper middle. In the center, a full watermelon painted in warm to cool greens with articulated linear blue drawing lines. It rests solidly and should take over the small square. However, it never does. Miller's full command of the plastic language of paint carries the eye, hopping to 2 brick-colored reds on either side on crockery. One warm, one cool. The cool one, to full volume in the vessel form, meets a complementary pale jade green in a most delicate touch. It's just one of the many color meetings that strike a chord of familiar yet original beauty. Speaking of meetings, her mastery allows her to alter the quality of those meetings, some with the softness of clouds, others decisively carrying out a negative space or important edge. The vessel has a white cloth draped on top of it. Miller's knowledge of drapery folds and how light makes them solid is reminiscent of Pierrot, or better yet, Cezanne and his stubborn exactitude. Moving to the left then, a wedge of ochre, up to the plane in the modernist sense, takes us to the deepest space, at which point one needs to readjust one's deep space focus to the whole and find a visual path once again. This visual adjustment adds up an unexpected element of surprise. To the deep peach on the left, its accurate, who wrote this? Its accurate edge and purpled shadow. To the peach on the lower left, its orange-red shadow and the sublime green highlights, not identical to any other green in the work. The crisp and deliberate edges, what looks like manganese on the left and ultramarine on the right, which turn the peach, bringing it to solidity. An astounding blade of light in blue with a lime line and a blue shadow separate the orange peaches, the one on the right hanging in balance with the darker blue shadow, hiding the only yellow peach, its volume highlighted in the yellow that must have come from that blade of light. A wiggle of blue painted line carries us on, and there it is, the rose, in a small white vase. It's a peachy colored rose with 4 green leaves in a star arrangement. It's solo. It's the complementary match to the blue. The blue articulates it. It's delicate. It bursts its beauty, unlike the inert beauty on the peaches and vessels. One of its leaves points us back due to the pitch of dark to light. Now we travel across the melon shadow to the left, and here's where Miller takes a bow. Another fabric, beige linen colored, wraps its way in from the left. It's not so solid in the Cezannian fashion. Miller makes 2 marks of what appears to be cadmium red. Ta-ta, she says in her visual mastery, finished with a flare.
That was fantastic. You are much more fun than I probably will ever be. Can you hear me? Good. Thank you, Ro. So I'm going to show just from a couple of visits that I made to see Ruth at her studio. Some of the paintings in the show downstairs, but then a few things that kind of relate to them. And I think it's kind of interesting to see the thought process a little bit in terms of one painting that you might say maybe it's not finished, but maybe it is, and one that's in the show and the state that it's in. So the first one is these two here. And I tasked my painting class to go and draw from Ruth's paintings downstairs and choose 3 that they wanted to, closer. They were to choose three to study and examine, and one was a still life, the other an oak tree from Missouri, and the third would be one of the Landenberg trees, just to understand the language, because I think it's so fascinating to have those paintings paired side by side. And I'm not going to do this here, you could do that just by stepping downstairs. But you see that language coming from looking at de Kooning and Gorky and being present in the New York environment in the 50s and 60s. And then you see how that became her powerful, beautiful language. And when I decided to go draw myself, I thought I was going to draw the one with the skull, and then a magnet drew me to this pumpkin, which is so strange because it's so completely solid. It's like the densest form in the universe. And then it's surrounded by these other forms that are kind of ephemeral. So I was going to say some words that I thought of as I was drawing, because as artists, when we go to draw from other artists, whether masters or contemporary painters, you learn so much about what's happening, and you can really get into the head of the artist as you draw from the painting. You see things you'd never see just looking for a minute or two or even an hour if you didn't have a pencil in your hand. So I'm going to use this thing here, but we were discovering a lot of stuff looking at this painting, which was really fun. One of the things I really love, and I drew from it once and then I drew from it again tonight, is that the way that coffee pot is squeezed into place by this strange form that Ruth tells me is a skull on the right and the pumpkin on the left. There's such a rhythm that kind of bounces around in the painting, and then it comes into the coffee pot. And then a similar rhythm from the skull comes from the other side, or the shell, and then also into the coffee pot, kind of anchoring it in the most solid and intense way. And so the way that Ruth moves around the coffee pot with color, it's like, and sort of breaks it open with color. It feels so cubist that it is so exciting. And then when you see Ruth does these wonderful things where colors just kind of hover in a space around an object and seem to like whisper to that object. So as I was drawing, I began to see that yellow behind the coffee pot up here, and how it relates down to this form and sort of speaks to it. But then that yellow, we were also talking about ping-ponging. There's a kind of like ping-ponging movement all over the painting, and it's funny because that pumpkin is so solid, you think it would be a static painting. But no, like just looking at yellows from here to down here, there's yellow at the bottom here. There's hints of yellow in here. So there's this sort of musical kind of spatial orchestration that's so beautiful with color and rhythm and mark. And one of the things that I also love is mark, how a mark, like you mentioned the 2 red marks, which are totally insane. There's also all these marks in this painting that kind of speak to the bigger forms and just hold them in place. Like there's a little wedge mark down here. When you look at that and then you consider the pumpkin, it becomes this massive form, but it feels like it needs that little mark just to hold its place in space. That if it didn't have the mark, and Stanley talks about this sort of stuff, like if it didn't have that mark, that pumpkin would roll away. And it would. And then also the similar mark here holds that space, so you can see those 2 marks, and they're so completely plastic. It's just beautiful. They have a color relationship. You can't see it in the slide, of course. Another thing that is what I love is about her work, and this always captures me in terms of it's such a mystery, is the kind of tension between what's solid and what's hazy or ephemeral or evaporating or disappearing. And it's not, there's no logic. And, you'd think, oh, I'm going to pull that cup forward, so I'm going to make it really strong so it comes forward. But no, the cup just shimmers there, and it's only held in place by, or whatever it is, by that mark, this one, right? Or this cup evaporates into the shell, but it's so there at the same time. The one on the right is interesting because it's, of course, it's a similar setup, so you can see her dealing with the same motif in a completely different way with the color. You can see the cup moving with the drawing marks. You can see the directional movement, and this sort of, everything's cool on this painting, whereas so much is warm on the left. Anyway, I'm going to show some other ones. So here's that painting downstairs, the one that I thought I would draw from first, which is, I think, a masterpiece. And there's the setup. The white thing is a cup with a napkin stuck into it. Yeah. And you can see how she's so moved by the light. And what I thought was a window is just some crummy paper up there. But then like this thing on the right, I'm looking at that painting and I was, what is this? It's like a Rothko up here. And it's so magical, and it's one of those ephemeral sort of hovering, quivering color shapes that is so profoundly connected to the black and white mark here, in my opinion, and to what's going on in front. Like there's such a wonderful dialogue between those forms. It just seemed to me like an abstract moment of light, but then now look over here and it's this pot. So that's kind of fascinating. It's just so, what was it?
No, I mean,
Incredible, right?
that's fantastic that you showed that. There it is over there.
It's right there.
And that red rectangle is like it's right out of
Yeah,
an abstract,
absolutely. Yeah.
piece.
So it's so interesting to me to see what, and I think I'm going to show you a cool one soon, maybe the next one. Yeah, here, this is awesome because this is the same painting in March. Here's, on the right is March, and here is August in the studio. This is so, it's so abstract. It's so, the masses are so dense, like that watermelon. It starts off being dense, but it gets like 10 times more dense in the later one. And then this strange, I think it's probably, the object is in the other photograph. The way it changes from these two is, here it's just a series of horizontal and verticals, and here it becomes almost like this strange creature, like a giant chess piece of a mouse, right? And then look at what she did, like the blue black here, and then, the difference, and how this leads you up into this mysterious nighttime world. And one thing too is that, look, this is just logical, you know what that is, but then when you see what happened, the cloth becomes like cement or lava moving in from the bottom, and it climbs up the pot in the craziest way. So fascinating. And then there's this moment which I think of Andrew, and it's this little red dot up here in the corner, which I did a close up of. You can see how abstract the painting is when you see it up close like that. So, wow. I mean, I know the Landenberg trees are, they're bold and they're intense, and they're kind of unbelievable in their ambition, but this is too, my opinion. So there's the greatest painter, saved from me. So there are more of the objects, which is interesting. And this is a painting that's in the process in the studio. And I'd love to see how the things move around again, like chess pieces, that blue thing, which is in this painting here, which really feels like a watcher, somebody watching, you know, sort of like here's the art student and here are all the giants of, you know, art, you know. And they all are, the personality of them all is so completely intact, even, you know, right now in the painting. And then you kind of know, like, if she were to go back into this, you know, it might, something just as radical might happen as what happened here. There's the pot we saw down below in the other painting. And I don't know what that Mickey Mouse character was. I didn't see that one. So the last thing I'm not saying anything that I wrote down, but I guess it's okay. The last slide to show is my beautiful Ruth painting. And I just wanted to say that it's so beautiful to have the possibility of living with a painting like this. So it's taken on two different, this morning I took this, so this is one wall and that's on another wall. So more light and the painting completely changes. Everything changes. So that's, you know, looking at a painting over time is a great thing. I mean, there's so much there with her forceful diagonals and horizontals and verticals, and then the crazy rhythms that I've been in love with that red limb, which is like an elbow forever. I sort of see this tree as Ruth. And so when you think of it that way, then you see all the iterations, like here, it also has teeth. I didn't notice that before, but like there's some teeth. She's reaching out, you know, it's a moment in her life when she was painting these, it was pretty intense, dealing with her mother's illness and being at home in Missouri and painting the beautiful light that you spoke about. Stretching and reaching and connecting with nature. There's such a tenderness with the way that the limbs touch the other trees. Or the way that boulder, which you see in all the paintings, is in this painting, it's just so solidly there, but kind of hemmed in place by those other verticals. So maybe that's all I need to say. Oh, yeah, there's Ruth. Studio. Lovely. Thank you. Stanley, you wanna do this?
Put my, yeah, okay, now put the next one on. So it's so interesting is that this is a Rose painting that she showed. And I've been looking at it, trying to figure it out. And it's like, it's the same objects. You know what everybody's been saying is, and maybe this is why we're pretty clear about how great Ruth is, and Glenn Goldberg and I decided that to talk with just what you guys have already said. Yep, Ruth is the best. She's the best. So Ruth, it's true. I mean, what are we gonna say? Yeah, and the thing is, you have to hang out with these paintings. People have. So we got a painting of it was a trade, I think, and it's really not as emotional a painting as the some that are downstairs and others of hers. Seeing it from this angle, I can't even. I see it that way better. I'm just gonna look this way. So it's not that big. The painting is this big, and it's very calm, but it completely does not make any sense. So when you look at it, you get two things. You get this amazing order, but so I'll tell you, I'm looking at the little one. So can anybody, I'd really open it up to everybody. I'm looking at that one.
On the right?
Yeah, yeah, but
Oh, that's the next
I, no, don't do that. Go back, yeah, right there. What I did was, a couple times was take, I had to give a lecture, and so I took Ruth's paintings and we projected them up like this and then just sat there. And then people would make comments. And in a certain way, everybody's said everything you could say. I can't add anything. I actually say if we just waited for, let's say, 30 seconds of silence, and then somebody has to say, oh yeah, look at that. So let's try it. Here we go. Somebody's gonna have to count out. Do you think we can do 30 seconds? That's a long time on one of these things. Let's do 35 seconds. Okay, here we go. Boom. All right, and actually, it does work to do that because as you stare at it, anybody have any remarks? Anything they like? What popped out? What'll happen is something pops to in your brain, like, oh, look at that.
Yeah, at first you don't see what it is. It's so abstract. I mean, they got that blue curve of the zone.
Has anybody noticed that on the far right, there's this thin yellow. And, oh my God, I mean, how did, so I decided, you can make these statements and but it really is a monumental painting, and it's small and quiet too. It doesn't knock you over when you go in and look at it. It's just quiet. But as you look at it and keep thinking about it, it grows in your mind, and it becomes kind of, you start to feel you have to make huge statements about it. And that's what it is with Ruth. I mean, the paintings might seem like one way, but people who have lived with them, they get this feeling keeps coming, and you really can't. Well, one thing that I wanted to try, there's, when we talk about painting, we're missing a huge vocabulary because we don't have a concept of discussing when the painter is painting from nature, and there's two things that Ruth is, and she's painting from observation, and the whole tradition of painting from observation has these mysteries, and it's the unsolved part that has not, it's not been solved, and people have passed it over. But anybody from the first day they go out and paint their first few strokes know there's something going on here that is really kind of, that is important and great. And then you keep doing it for like 80 years, and you realize that this thing it's a big deal, actually. And all the abstraction and all the art world stuff is on another world. This is a kind of like a kind of contained thing. And Ruth is the guiding, living spirit of it. I mean, it's just, but what is it? Well, the thing about this, it has a lot to do with what we learned, like from Nick, and from basically from Hoffman and from and it's like the Chardin, that when you're actually trying to paint what you see, you realize that there's no boundaries, and the picture looks dead and flat as you're painting on it. You know, you paint, and so what that the red apple that's redder on the bottom is literally lifting out of the picture plane, and it's really starts a whole series of forms that are invisible that float between, so the picture opens up, and that's what painters are all doing. I mean, so when you see a painting that's good, it's because something's pulled, it comes out of the painting, grows outward. And everyone know, I've heard people talk about this all the time but it still is a big mystery to get it to happen when you're painting, because you'll be painting away and wondering why it's so horrible. And then at some point, by just an accidental thing at the last minute, you'll get some hope, because the picture goes bloop like that, and it catches you. The little bloop is you, and you get that thing of that we're here and the object is there. And so I think it's hard to talk about this, but when you look at the painting, you actually can feel Ruth looking at the painting, if you can get the outwardness, because the outwardness is reaching to her, and then we're taking Ruth's place, you know. So so there's this kind of complex, but it's real. And all painting does this. All abstract painting does it. The painting, anybody who's kind of makes their painting work, they say, oh, it worked now. But then you try to, what to do with it. So I've been looking at this, trying to figure out where well, I'm asking a stupid question, and I mean a very ponderous question. Where is the red apple? I mean, I wanted to ask Ruth, what was it on? Because it doesn't seem to be in the same space as the apple or the peach. I guess they're peaches. The second peach. It seems that they're and it was true in Rose painting. Ruth, so here it is. Ruth, what did you do? You're not going to tell us, right? What about those two peaches?
I should have worked on them longer.
No, I know she'd say something.
I don't know what to say,
I know, because artists don't want to talk about this stuff, but and I knew you, but to me it remains I always think, when I think, you look at Ruth's paintings and you think that's what happens, and I think, where is that red apple? Then a red peach. Then I go over to the left and say, well, wait a minute. And then I noticed that this thing sort of pushes down. Then I don't know where that is. And I'm kind of like off balance. But then, and I think everybody knows in the 35-second thing, is that your eye is moving around. You're slow, go this way, and then all of a sudden you come back. And the whole thing is sort of, and there's one last thing I'll say. I'm pretty sure about this in paintings, that you get things to move in a painting, you know, you do, whoop, whoop, and then you realize that that's bad too. You want it to kind of hold together. And the way that, and I'm not good at that, I must say that's something I've never been able to do. And all the painters that I listened to, they always said it was the color that did that. And it's Ruth's colors that do it in this painting. It's the way she holds that, the violet yellow, look at that violet yellow thing. And it's a little, so after all the movement, there's this counter thing that's holding everything still. And that becomes this, and the two together, it's a trip. It's great, Ruth.
Well, Stanley, you've covered a lot of ground. And as I listen to you, I feel very much that you're describing how it was to be working, because I'm always very involved or concerned or excited about location. And of course it keeps changing. And I think that's what you're describing as I work and as a painting begins to, develop, and it generates more ideas that I want to attack or to try to understand, or but I'm not thinking like that. I'm just responding to how things are finding their placement and their location and the relationship to the other objects. And in that sense, I think we're always pushing toward more abstraction. And though you're looking more intensely, or you're finding out more things that you didn't see at first. And so there's that kind of dialogue in time.
Yeah.
And I'm learning a lot from all four of you. I can't wait to get back to the studio.
Shall we open it up to some questions? Great. Does anyone have any questions in the room?
I really, really love how deliberate every brushstroke is, but it also just seems like it comes so naturally at the same time. Like I think that is the most impressive thing. I wanted to know if there's kind of like a specific process that you go through in order to decide what you kind of zero in on and what you choose to like omit or depict in less detail, because there are certainly, like, your eye travels through the piece, but there's also specific parts that like really pull you in. You can tell that there was a lot of like conscious like witchcraft and like mastery put into that. So yeah, I kind of just want to know if there's like a specific thought process or like method, or if it just is something that comes totally naturally.
Do you want to answer?
No, I couldn't hear all of it. And I'd like to ask if she's asking about, do I have a process? Was she asking? Oh.
Yeah, what's your,
No, I don't.
do you have a process of sort of shifting between, this object will be a little bit more definite than this object, or is it spatial or tonal? Or more organic than that?
I think Elisa addressed that. She seems to be very acutely aware of that.
I think you see that when you draw from the paintings. It's in the process. It's there for you, but I don't know.
I think
When
it
you're
happens
painting, you're
also
painting.
to some extent in my way of drawing, because though I'm not thinking like that, I'm not thinking this will be clear and this will be, because it has nothing to do with what I feel is important and what isn't, because all of it is important. The spaces between are just as important as the images or the objects. It's a very good observation of hers, very good question.
Can I say something in regard to
Yes,
that? Because
yes.
we've had a lot of conversations, and I also listened to all your talks before the thing, just to see what you said when you were preparing something. And one of them was, painting is a long pursuit. Looking, memory, and desire all play a role. And you talked about memory as, although you're after a kind of identity and presence. And I think the word presence is something you say a lot. And
Yes, I'm involved in all that as much as any kind of organization, but the organization or the painting, how it begins to evolve. And that language is as important as say, an object, because that is really the image, the entire painting, the total, and my relationship to it, and its relationship to me. And I feel that the best of my paintings, and probably they evolve from the making, from the work. I don't come with a preconceived, I am looking at something, and I'm honoring it, and I'm not copying it, it's obvious. I think describing in a way of copying is probably, it's not enough. And it's not what I'm after. I think it's a mystery what I just want to get it right. And that's what I want to do. I want to get it right. I want to find it. And the longer I work often on a painting, the more challenging it becomes. And the needs are greater. And I think probably to answer partly the question is things that may seem less clear, though I hope that's not the right word, or developed, no, I don't know which word, and other things that are vaguer, that the way Lisa was describing it was, I think, very good. They're equally important. I think that all the paintings that I do sort of hang asking what will come next, what will be the next, will it be another painting? I return to the same motifs over and over, and probably I don't exhaust them. They just become more, and I think, I've spoken about this before, but they just become more meaningful or more the things. If I could work on this shell and teapot probably the rest forever, but I probably won't, because when I was working with vegetables and organic, objects, there was sort of an urgency, a different sort of urgency in the work, because they would decay, and that put a different. Now I think I'm working. The work is even more contemplative and moving further away from that kind of urgency to something more contemplative, and that's where I am now.
Great, thank you, Ruth.
Ruth, I wonder if you could say something about setting up the motifs.
Oh, that's Susan's voice. Susan and I talked about this one time before we were together. I think it was up at Dartmouth. Was it Susan? Or
I think so, yes.
and we were together looking at objects and in a store, and we were choosing things. And but I think you're asking more about this. How do I set up? How I set it up? Is that what you're asking more?
Yes.
It isn't casual. It takes often a long time. I'm looking at it from all different angles. I'm looking at it even from behind. I'm very aware of how close I am to it, or my relationship to it, my body relationship to it. It takes a while. Sometimes it's it's probably built in somewhere, built into my vision, or something that I'm intuitively looking for. I know when I find it, or at least I find something that looks back at me. It's almost like, and I think you've all been aware of the frontality in the work, which has to do with attention and something looking back at me, these objects. I don't move them around a lot, but I sometimes move them around a bit, even after I've started a painting. I don't think you probably do that, Susan.
Sometimes she does.
You do sometimes? Did I answer your question at all?
Yeah. I mean, I was also thinking about sometimes there's a piece of, like how you deal with the background, which can be challenging in still life. And sometimes you use a kind of drapery that's almost like a stage curtain. Well.
Yes, in some of the later ones, it is almost like a stage curtain. I got involved with, it appears over and over, and it was very difficult, and I couldn't really find what I wanted to my satisfaction with the drapery. But I was really challenged and fascinated by it, and like the other things in the painting, it gave me a lot of difficulty, and I cursed it, but I also fell in love with it, and I kept trying. I think what you're asking is, was I looking at, does it sort of hint at a stage setup, or some setup that where these are characters in front of us of a, I don't know.
How long does it take to do the setup?
It depends. Sometimes, but it will take part of a day maybe, or a few hours. Or sometimes I think that I have what I want, and I start a painting, and then I realize I see something quite different, and then I start over. But it's usually not fast. Sometimes I think it maybe should be faster. It's a matter of control. The still life artist is in control of their, how they're going to set it up, and I think sometimes, shall I just sort of spill things on the table and let's see what happens, and respond to that. But I do set them up. Yeah, I definitely set them up.
Thank you, Ruth. I have a question for the panel. Most of you were talking about her Ruth's still lifes, but I wonder if you could address some of these bigger early tree paintings. I would just love to hear your responses to them.
On the left is, I mean, so powerful.
What about the 60s paintings?
Go back to this. Stanley, you were drawing from one. What were you discovering? You were drawing from this one.
Yeah, but what about the big one on the down on the right-hand side? Get that one. That's the one I was drawing. The biggest one. It's keep going. That one. That one. That's so. It is, and when you start looking at, I said, well, what am I supposed to do if I draw it? What's going to happen? But actually, things did happen, and it's just you're so amazed by the order that sort of just starts coming, even though you don't see it at first. But it has something to do with one thing that I did find that I guess I could even say is that I thought this rectangle in the I ended up with this, that the rectangle, when I first looked at the painting, the big rectangle in the center of the painting, which was with the lighter color, it's what puzzled me. I couldn't, that was at the opening. I couldn't figure out what it was doing. And then today, I realized, oh, it's part of a house. And so what I think she has going on in this painting is there's two ways of looking at the painting. One is the without the top of the house way, and then there are these rectangles forms that kind of come up right in there between things that are like separate volumes. So that pushes the painting in one direction, but if you look up and say, oh, it's a house, you immediately go, whoop, you know, there's the house, and the painting kind of turns back. So I think what she was working, I mean, so I think what you can do is, like, you know, you listen to music, you know, you try to figure out what the player is doing, even though the player is it's already done. But, you know, we listen and then we say, what's happening when the solo, and then so that's what we're doing. It's more for our benefit, you know, and somehow you can figure out what a solo should do, what a soloist, how a solo is trying to work through, you know, in the popular song, you have the beginning and the bridge and the end, and so you're always working through the structure. So what's the structure of this? So and I'm always looking for a simple structure that's underneath it. And I said to Ruth and Barbara, I said, well, you know, I'm only going to talk about, here I am talking about myself, but you said it's okay to do that. So my final idea was that somehow there's a motion to the left, and then there's a motion to the right, and there's a swing back and forth, and all this incredible stuff on the top, which you don't even notice, but like that little, that hook of blue coming down from the sky, which comes over the trees, and it has a weird thing, you know, that's like the sky coming in over, and that's all worked out. But like I mean, I gotta say, we painters know this, and Ruth, we're all painters. I mean, not all of us, but painters know. You don't know what you're doing, but you do discover things. So when you do it, you say, I did something. You can at least see that something good has happened. And in a way, there's amazing moves to rebalance. The painting is, I think it's incredibly great painting. Monumental too.
Ruth, when you said that when you're working with the motif and you work with the motif again and again, can you guys put up the picture of the green teapot? I know that this is a motif you've been processing or thinking about or working on in the past few years, maybe. You said when you're working with a motif repeatedly, it becomes more meaningful to you. Can you talk about can you say more about that? What does that mean? What is the meaning? How does it become more meaningful?
Well, I become more deeply involved with it. It's not something that you can express in words. It becomes more real. Before it's there it is, it's out there, and the motif is out there, and then there's the canvas, and there's you. And after working on a longer time, this could be one painting or it could be several, but you're asking about the motif. It begins to take on a life of its own, sometimes quite early. And it becomes unknown to you. And you're trying to develop or to find it or to somehow know it. And during the process, it becomes more elusive and maybe more unknown. And in that way, more challenging. And you fall in love with it. Not the painting exactly, because the painting is beginning to have a very deep life of its own, but you're in love with that green tea pot and that shell and with the space that's being found and created. And it becomes just more real. And by that I don't mean like reality where it's described as we were talking about, but in terms that it exists and it's somehow has its own existence. It stands there and looks back at you, and it exists. And that's a meaning that's, I think, very profound for me. It's filled with time, but it's timeless, and it's pushing back a death. It's pushing back the end of everything. It sounds like I'm giving a lot of significance to my painting, but the process or my relationship to it is that's the meaning. It becomes, I want to just keep working. I feel centered, but I'm also entering a very mysterious realm, and I'm finding out things that keep opening up, and I keep finding out more and more. Does that answer any of your questions?
Yes, thank you.
I'm conscious of the time, so I'm afraid that'll be our last question for this evening, but please thank our panelists and of course Ruth for sharing her work. Okay, so for those of you, I understand that some of you must go, but we do have a video conclusion that we'd like to share with you. If you'll just bear with us, it's a very brief video, but again, I understand some of you might have to leave.
Okay, is this on? Okay, so at Ruth's solo show, it was well attended and wildly successful. And after her opening, her guest list of her closest friends could not be edited or pared down to under 40 people. So we had a very lovely large dinner here, which included a singing toast by sculptor Lee Tribe to Ruth in the tune of Stardust. I'm ending this with, it's about a minute and a half of a beautiful evening in the Whitney at the Studio School.
This isn't easy, I'm actually quite terrified. Go get some air in here. Sometimes I wonder why my lonely nights painting me still. Ruth's color melody brings in harmony of magic tones and the beat. Your brushes and each stroke and inspiration. I have so far and find my consolation in the pleasures you throw up, a painting low, with some so good, your composition shines. The miracle in a fairy tale of orange leaves and its and though I painted my heart with your words remain a stardust melody, a light of me.
Thank you, Ro, for sharing that lovely video with all of us. And we'll continue with our own refreshments downstairs in the clay room. Thank you all for coming.